Welcome to Films Apart, the podcast where we poke fun at buried flops, unearth hidden gems, and explore timeless classics.
So grab yourself some popcorn, sit back, and let's break these films apart.
Today's episode is Hot Fuzz.
Yeah?
So continuing from last week where we reviewed a film of your choice.
With Nell and I.
Yes. We're now going to look at what I consider one of my favourite British comedies.
Is it your favourite British comedy, would you say?
No.
No.
I don't know what is.
So it could be. But
it could be.
The jury's out.
Yeah, maybe this podcast will help me decide.
Okay.
We'll see.
Right, so go on then. Sell it to me.
So, Hot Fuzz. Synopsis for the film. So, a top-form police sergeant is reassigned from London to the countryside in
Gloucestershire.
Yes. Because he's too good at his job and he's making everyone else look bad. So he comes across what you think to be a group of seemingly do-gooders within the...
Like a small town village association.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like a community watch.
Yeah.
Type thing. Who will go to any length to ensure that their village retains its form of being the perfect community.
And wins the
Village of the Year
Village
award.
of the Year.
Yeah. Which you find out later is a cover-up for a cult that are willing to kill in order to win this award.
Yeah. I'll tell you what struck me initially, which didn't strike me the first time I watched it, was that it's filmed in Wales.
Yes.
Now, when I watched it the first time, I lived in the Midlands, whereas now I live in Somerset. I live not far from Wales. I've been to Wales so many times. So now when I'm seeing them going around this village, small village, what I'm fully aware of is actually that they're in a small city.
Yeah.
Although it's not city-sized by any means.
Well, I'm pretty sure that Edgar Wright, the director, he grew up in Somerset.
Didn't Simon Pegg grow up in Gloucestershire as well or somewhere?
Did he?
I'm sure he's...
Let's look that up quickly. He was born in Gloucestershire.
Yeah.
You're right. I didn't know that about him. But yeah, so both of them, country boys, making an action film. And it has been described, I think, by themselves as...
the best film ever made.
They're
not all arrogant about it.
They're not very humble. They sort of call it like a bad boys in the country, I suppose, which it is. It's an interesting...
A Bad Boys in the Country?
Yeah, because of obviously they've watched Bad Boys in the film.
Oh, yeah, Bad Boys film, that was in my head. That comes into film as well, doesn't it? Yeah. But when you said Bad Boys in the Country, I was thinking, who's the bad
they're
boys?
Not naughty. They're good boys.
If anything, they're good, yeah.
They're really good boys. I think interestingly as well about this film, talking about Edgar Wright's childhood and growing up in Somerset, this is almost a remake of a student film that he made called Dead Right, or an amateur film that he made in 1993, which follows a very similar plot of a cult in a small sort of village.
Yeah.
And it has some similar plot points. It's a lot more meta, with parts where he gets pulled from behind the camera as the director and like taken as a hostage in different bits. But it has a lot of the same humour. It's interesting to see this style and humour rooted from his early films and to have carried on into now blockbusters.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know that. I think you definitely get the feeling that this film has been worked at.
Yes.
Interestingly, we came into this, and I came to this film firmly believing that this was the worst of the three. What they called the trilogy? What do they call it?
The free-flavoured Cornetto Trilogy.
So of the Shaun of the Dead, The World's End, and Hot Fuzz, I always felt that Hot Fuzz was the weakest for me personally. Not necessarily least accomplished, but just not the best. Mm-hmm. But actually what I found watching it this time was that the writing is very, very solid.
Yeah.
There's so many things that are seeded early on.
Well, I think that's commonplace with all Edgar Wright movies. I'm a little bit biased. He's my favourite director. My favourite film, one of being Baby Driver. I think a lot of his films are very guilty of giving you the entire plot almost in like a bite-sized chunk at the start. Like in Shaun of the Dead, you have the channel flicking that basically talks you through the entire film.
Yeah.
You have it sort of again in here. In the World's End, the name of the pubs basically give what's going to happen in that pub each time.
But they're little things that you could either pick up on
Yeah.
or not.
It's normally like on second viewing.
Yeah.
They're films that are made to be rewatched, I find.
And maybe that's what my experience was with this.
Yeah.
Was that I picked up more on it than I did the first time. Because the first time I got so hung up on certain things, which we'll talk about as we go through. So, first thoughts on it are obviously at the core of it. You've got Simon Pegg, who's this accomplished policeman who comes to the country and bumps into who becomes his kind of police partner, Nick Frost.
Yeah.
You've got the partnership. Obviously, they work so well together.
Yeah.
Nick Frost is so endearing. He's like a little kid, isn't he?
He's like a puppy.
I found him he's hilarious and innocent.
But you completely buy it. It's not like it's overdone.
Yeah.
He is this, like you say, like a child that's just bewildered by, oh my God, it's a real policeman. They don't have any police work to do in this small village because it's seemingly innocent. And there's a big London policeman coming.
Big city policeman.
Yeah,
like
seen it all.
Yeah.
And stabbed.
And obviously you've got this, his dad's the chief of the police there. And both of them have got this love for Western films, and it's almost like that's the relationship that's being fostered between Simon Pegg. It's like Simon Pegg is this kind of Western gun-toting, character, gunslinger coming in. It's things like that. That's the stuff that I think is seeded really well. It's little things like that. It's so dense with that.
Well, I think the introduction of Nick Frost's character, you have Simon Pegg's character go to the pub. I think he has a juice or a tap water. And you have Nick Frost, this drunk, had way too many, gets his car keys, goes to head outside, gets locked up, and then the next morning he's already in work early, his new partner, because he's been arrested the night before by Simon Pegg. I think that's such a brilliant introduction.
Well, he comes in, he goes, "Where's he gone?"
Yeah.
And he goes, oh, "Where's he?"
Yeah. He comes in from behind.
He comes in from behind him.
Where's he gone? I feel like it is such a good buddy cop movie. It's very British. It does a buddy cop film in its own way completely.
It's incredibly British. And one of the things about the film, it's like a who's who in British comedy talent. You know, if you look at the cast list, you've got obviously Simon Pegg, Nick Frost, Paddy Considine, incredible actor, Timothy Dalton, old James Bond star, Jim Broadbent, Olivia Colman, Bill Nighy, Martin Freeman, Rafe Spall, Stephen Merchant, Adam Buxton, Lucy Punch. There's just so many famous people in it.
And I think a lot of them end up being recurring sort of players in this Cornetto trilogy. A lot of them returning in different roles. Most of them showing up in Shaun of the Dead as well.
Which was the first of the three, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah. And then you had The World's End.
So I'd still say Shaun of the Dead's probably my favourite of the three.
Yeah. I feel Hot Fuzz is my favourite of the three. Not to say that I don't like the other two, but I feel like that's the one that was a sort of my introduction to Edgar Wright. And I remember that being the one that I watched as a child. The others I sort of watched as an adult. So maybe they've not stuck with me quite as much as Hot Fuzz.
Yeah, I haven't watched Shaun of the Dead for a long time. I probably watched The World's End last. So it'd be good to watch it again. I know that it came out at the cinema not long ago, and I was going to go and see it, and I just didn't get a chance to. Yeah, it would have been good to see it at the cinema.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, what I did feel about this film, and maybe it is the best of the three from a technical point of view, I don't know, but I found the writing was so interesting from things like the motif of the rubber plant, which seems to play this big part in it at the beginning when he's talking with his ex-partner.
Yeah.
And she's like, you care more about your rubber plant, and he goes, it's a peace lily.
Yeah.
And then you see him like going to the new town. All he's got on him is this like peace lily. Yeah. And I was just like, that's like his only relationship in life is with this plant.
And the only way he knows to extend a hand out to his new friend is by getting him a peace lily. Firstly,
he extends it in conversation where he talks about this peace lily to him, and then for his birthday he intends to buy him one.
Yeah.
Doesn't quite go according to plan.
No.
And then a little bit later on, he's getting attacked, and he uses the peace lily to smash the Yarp character over the head, whatever his name. Yarp. Yarp.
It saves him.
Yeah, it saves him. Yeah. So I thought it was interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so many things are kind of knitted into it.
Yeah.
Quite well.
I think he really is I'd argue an auteur. I think he's a very modern example of an auteur, writer and director, who has their own style with sort of match pans, dolly zooms.
There was another example of a motif. It's when they're having that tender moment, Nick Frost and Simon Pegg, where he's talking about being a good Muppet, and then he goes, and it's a really warm moment that shows they're getting closer. Then all of a sudden, Nick Frost stabs himself in the eye.
Yeah, with the ketchup.
Just ketchup goes everywhere, but he doesn't know it's ketchup. And he's like, "What have you done?
Yeah, oh my God."
He goes, "It's just ketchup."
Yeah.
And at the time, I thought, when I watched it, and I'd forgot about the end of this one, when I watched it, I thought, that is brilliant. It was a really warm, tender moment that was just broken up with this hilarious slapstick moment. But then that seeds, obviously, what happens at the end, which just didn't occur to me. And obviously until the end, when he goes to stab him.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm getting ahead of ourselves a little bit here, aren't I? Should we go back to the synopsis?
Well, yeah.
What
I
happens?
think it's fine where you were going with it. I think, like you say, there's this. It's a recurring theme in the entire Cornetto trilogy where the moment it gets too sincere, it has to be broken. Like any sort of male friendship happens, the moment it gets too close to the bone, you've got to make a joke, break it.
yeah.
But so there's this village of seemingly nice country people.
Yeah, sort of very stereotypical locals.
Yeah.
Small town locals.
Small town. Everyone knows everyone.
Everyone cares about little things a lot more than they really should, and that's the viewpoint that you're coming from, where Simon Pegg's coming from the big city, and the things that it appears, at least, that they're bothered about are the Asbos.
Yeah.
You don't really hear that so much these days, do you, Asbos? No. And that busker who stands still, like painted in gold.
He's making it look tacky.
Those are the things that bother them.
Yeah.
Which, I live in a small town now, and every year we get travellers come, and the outrage is just palpable. All of a sudden, no, the travellers are back. The travellers are back. It's all like, it becomes this huge, big drama. You start to see things in the local newspaper about it and online, and people are chatting about it, and they're going, we need to get rid of them. It's very much like that small town mentality. But unlike the small town that I live in, where how they get around it by moaning about it and going, this is just terrible, how can we exist like this? They take things to another level.
Yeah, they take it into their own hands. They answer it. They kill them. They do what has to be done for the greater good. Yeah.
So you don't know that to begin with, do you? You
No.
know what you're introduced to,
it.
the Timothy Dalton character, Simon Skinner. He's the villain, and he comes in at the very beginning, and he's running after the policeman, and he goes, "Arrest me, I'm a slasher," or something like that, doesn't he?
Yeah.
So he kind of outs himself as this slasher. So that, again, seeds something in your head. The music seeds it. It's not subtly seeded, really. It's quite heavily seeded. That, maybe there's something more to this than him slashing the prices at his supermarket, which he jokes about.
Yeah.
And so then when people start dying, immediately we assume that the person who's doing it is this slasher, and that's what his role is. But it becomes more than that as time goes by. It's not the story of a serial killer in a town. It's the story of a town of serial killers.
Yeah, they're all bastards. I think, like you say, it roots it all very well, and a lot of the dialogue and wording, it's really not subtle, but it can pass you by on the first watch. I think it's not until the second watch where you sort of, everything's so finely crafted, like you say, him saying, "Oh, I'm a serial slasher," all these different lines that hint at stuff. And then I still think, jumping ahead a bit, the twist that the town's there's a cult that basically kills in order for the greater good of this town to win an award. And you're following Simon Pegg's character, who's like, there's a new motorway road being built. It's going to go through half the village. Like, all the small businesses are going to go out of business. And it being this quite big major conspiracy to it, then being brought back down to, no, we want to win Village of the Year.
Yeah.
I think that's really smart.
It is quite clever. The areas for me where it's very difficult, because I still feel like probably out of the three Cornetto films, it's probably still my least favourite.
Yeah.
Despite what I feel about the kind of craft of it. And I've been asking myself why. What is it that bothers me about the film? And I think that the first thing is, the film slowly develops. You get to know the character, you get to know the policeman, you get to see his role in the police force and how he's kind of disrupting the town, and his relationship with Nick Frost is brilliant. You've got this people dying one by one, slowly growing and growing into this thing that he's trying to solve. And then all of a sudden he figures it out when he stumbles across the cult.
Yeah.
And it is literally like a cult. They're like chanting Latin.
Yeah.
All sitting around in a circle in these dark cloaks. For me, that just doesn't grab me. That there's something about that like it didn't need. I don't know what it is, because on the one hand I feel like it didn't need to be like that, but then on the other hand, because of the way the film ends, which is in this mad shootout, which is completely over the top. Like, if you didn't have that, would that work? It's very hard to pick apart what it is about the film that doesn't work for me, or that stops me enjoying it as much as I enjoy some of his other films. I can't quite put my finger on it. I found that the idea of this immutable law that Jim Broadbent talks about, that there's bigger things than the law. I used to believe in the law, and now it's about the greater good. That is a really interesting idea on its own, that like a society goes, I appreciate that we've got a law and that we should abide by this law, but actually the law isn't doing it, or there's things that we could do to make it better ourselves. It's a really interesting idea, and it's interesting to bring in that small town kind of idea of travellers, asbos, and buskers being. But I don't know. There's.
I think a lot of the reason it jumps so far into it is more so just to play on it with the jokes of them having this cult, they're speaking in Latin, and then Angela announce that someone's had a baby. I think it is just to put them together and have two
contrast,
the complete contrast of this small village, like small talk with a cult.
But that juxtaposition is already there with the fact that they're killing people, and they're talking about Angela having her twins or whatever it is. Like I found that in that moment where they are sitting around, and that's the first time and only time I think where you actually see them chanting.
Yeah.
And then straight after they stop chanting, then she goes, "Oh, by the way, the baby bird."
Yeah.
I don't. They could have just been sitting in a village hall, and they could have been going, "Oh, and Angela's had a baby, and this and that. Oh, and also we've killed such and such, and and we put. I think that we've now killed the policeman, like he's done. So hopefully that's not going to be a problem, and it shouldn't get in the way of us winning the award. I feel like it would have been better if he'd done that rather than going, "Oh, I'm in a name." Like, for me, that was like. That's the bit, I think. The first time I watched it, that's the bit that irritated me. And the second time I watched it with a more critical eye, and I could maybe forgive it slightly more in that sense. But still, for me, that's the bit that I struggle with. Mm-hmm. Also, the only other thing that I really struggle with is Timothy Dalton as the bad guy. Okay. Like, he almost feels... Again, this is obviously knowingly done, but... from the beginning he's a bad guy. I mean, he's just got that face. Ironically, he's played James Bond, but he just seems like a bad guy from the off. I almost wondered whether it would have been better played by a woman. It just felt like you still could have seeded that idea of the slasher and led someone down that road without it being so overt.
I think in order for it to... His sort of arrogance and him being so overtly... clearly involved with these murders, I think it works better than if it was held back a bit, because if you have obviously Simon Pegg, he knows this, but he can't do anything about it because he needs the evidence. He's such a do-gooder cop by the book, he can't go against his morals, and the villain knows this, so they almost are mocking it and sort of flaunting it in his face.
Yeah.
Because he knows... until he gets a bit of evidence, he can't do anything, and I have alibis for all the murders.
And you might be completely right with that, and it might not work any other way. But in my head, I would be really interested to see it done slightly differently with the villain, and slightly differently with the cult. Stuff, It's clear that was my Latin.
It's almost like it plays on that James Bond thing of the villain revealing the plan and then having to shoot him in the back because they've been too cocky. They went too far.
Do you think that was on purpose? It could, possibly. It could 100% have been. I could strongly believe that was what Edgar Wright was thinking. I mean, he's clearly knows what he's doing.
Yeah. I think there's always some ulterior motive behind his choices in his films.
It's almost like there's too much stuff going on is the only other thing. Like there is like so many things are seeded in so many different ways that sometimes it feels like it isn't necessary to seed that much stuff. But I still couldn't help but be like massively admiring of the writing in it.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting how all of his films always sort of merge two very different genres. Obviously, buddy cop, slasher. Shaun of the Dead, you have a sort of rom-com zombie film. In The World's End, you have a coming-of-age, end-of-the-world film about grown men coming of age. It's like it's interesting. There's always that blurring of genres.
Yeah.
Baby Driver, I guess, sort of musical action, I'd say.
It stands apart from those, I think.
And then Last Night in Soho is sort of... It's an interesting one. I feel like of all of his films, that's the one that stands up the least. I still enjoy it. Maybe
that was the one I went to see that at the cinema. That was the one with, what was the name? Who's in it? If it's the one I'm thinking of.
Thomasin McKenzie.
Oh yeah, she's really good.
And Matt Smith. Yeah. She's great in it. I think and Anna Taylor-Joy.
I know. Yeah,
it's a good film. I think the ending of that is a bit weaker though.
I felt like that film had more promise than it gave. When I saw the trailer to it, I was very, very excited. Maybe again, it's going into things with high expectations, but I enjoyed the film and thought she was great in it. But yeah, I know what you mean. It's very different for his.
Well, yeah, I think it's interesting.
But so's Baby Driver.
Yeah. I think doing 3 films of sort of proper British comedies, it's interesting to see them go make Hollywood blockbusters, probably with a lot more producer sort of pushback and suggestions. I wonder how much he's had to sort of sacrifice in his films, the later films, that are bigger blockbusters.
I mean, he obviously Scott Pilgrim was a sort of indie film.
Yeah,
that's a really good film, and he wrote Ant-Man.
Well, an earlier draft of it, I think it got completely basically scrubbed what he had done because they wouldn't let him make the film he wanted to make. I think there is aspects of it that you can see. Like I think the sort of heist scenes that are a recurring thing throughout the films where you have one of the characters recite what's happening and it quickly flash between the cross-cut. I think that's definitely something that was probably in the original script and they've kept. He had a big part in the Tintin film as well. That's a really good film. Yeah, he was part of the screenwriters that made that with Stephen Moffat, who does things like Doctor Who and Joe Cornish, who he works with.
Great writer.
I think he worked with Joe Cornish on Ant-Man.
And obviously he started with, I don't know who he started with, but the sitcom Spaced, which is just brilliant.
Yeah.
That's where the comedies begin, isn't it? That's where you've got this real kind of unique, quirky, spaced sitcom humour that then becomes more, I guess mainstream really, and generic. Generic sounds like the wrong word, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, like
mainstream,
generalised.
More wide appeal when it came to Shaun of the Dead and these 3 films. And the other thing I was reflecting on is, I mean, you talk about the films that you like involve brotherhood. Yeah. So is that kind of what makes you?
Because I think that they do have that brotherly quality in all the films with Simon Pegg and Nick Frost.
I mean, in this film especially, you know, you really see proper bromance. He leaves London with no friends. Nobody wants him there. No. His partner's gone off with somebody else. He turns up to a town on his own, becomes his only friend. It's done fairly subtly with a really nice moment. Then they go out, they get really drunk and they watch these films and then they become brothers, really.
Yeah, they are, aren't they?
That's one of the things that I was reflecting on about why I maybe preferred World's End. And I think the thing about World's End is, and I don't think it's a better film actually from a technical point of view or a writing point of view, but it's about a group of lads. Yeah. And it resonates with me, It just reminds me of, you know, when I was younger and us all going off on the lash and doing all that stuff, you know. So it's got that. And now I'm at that age where we've all moved on and our lives have all gone in different directions. And so that's where that film sort of begins.
Pulls you in. I suppose maybe that's why I think it's not that it's a bad film and I don't enjoy it, but I think it's probably my least favourite of the 3. Probably because I've not got to that stage yet where it is like looking back and everyone's moved on. It's like I'm getting to that part.
I'm too young, basically.
I am. I'm still a little too young for that. Like, we've not all got wives now and big jobs and kids to look after.
It might be that, but I think it's probably the weakest of the 3 films if you want to be hypercritical about it. I suspect. But, you know, there's a crossover, isn't there, with films? We're doing this because we love film and we want to understand the intricacies of film. But also we just like watching films. We enjoy film. And so there's two sides to it. There's understanding a film technically and the way it works, and then there's just that thing in a film that you watch because you like it. You know, whether that's musicals, horror films, whatever it is. You know, there's just something in it that grabs you.
Yeah.
Or personal things about, you know, brotherhood or group of lads or a romance, whatever it is. You know.
Yeah, I think definitely. I think that's probably what sets us apart with our sort of likes in films. It's not our likes for different technical abilities. I think technically we both like pretty much the same thing. We know what a good film is.
Yeah. So I'm glad that you chose this film. I'm glad that I watched it again.
Yeah.
It was better than I remembered.
Yeah.
And it makes me want to go back and watch the other two as well.
Yeah. I think his film, it's just for me, Edgar Wright, I think they just sum up everything that film should be for me. Because they look like so much fun to have made. They're so intricate in detail. The humour's always great. They're just such high energy. I feel like it's everything I love in film.
Yeah.
Just compiled into like an hour and a half.
It's interesting how the humour stands up, isn't it? That's what I find really interesting about his work. Going back to Spaced, you know, that humour is still... I find it still really funny. I don't, even though you can see that that's a sitcom that was made in the 90s, the humour still stands the test of time, and same in these films. And you can see that they've dated slightly, you know, things, technology, mobile phones, but the humour which comes from the relationships in it is still solid. So, should we popcorn score? Is there anything else you want to add first before?
I've not really got anything else to say. I think we'll probably wrap it up.
Go on then.
So, popcorn score, I'd say for me this is a 5 out of 5.
5 out of 5, sweet.
Yeah, sweet score.
Oh,
it's very biased because I like Edgar.
Yeah,
he's my favourite director.
See, this is difficult now. I'll tell you why this is
because
difficult.
Because if you give it a 5, it is 10 out of 10.
I wouldn't give it a 5.
No.
It's difficult because I almost want to give it a 3.
Yeah.
To bring the score down to an 8, which feels like corrupt in some way.
You're trying to...
I've got control of the final score. I can make it whatever it's going to be.
0.
But I think I have to give it a 4, which means that it is 4 salty popcorns and 5 sweet popcorns, which makes this our highest scoring film so far. Which, you see, this is 9 out of 10, whereas I would definitely say that With Nell and I is better. So it's a difficult...
I sort of shot you in the...
You did? I'll never forgive you.
So that's it.
Yeah,
So
that's
9
it.
out of 10 on the sweet and salty popcorn score.
Yeah, good pick.
Yeah. Well, thanks for listening, guys.
Thank you. Yeah, we will catch you soon.
Yeah, catch you on the next one. Bye.